I'd like to invite people to come down and pose their questions. I'm going to take the liberty of asking the first question while we're waiting. And it's a question, do you regard yourself as liberal or conservative?
Well, they call me everything. And I will not put myself in a kind of map. They call me conservative, they call me a liberal, they call me liberal conservative. I don't mind as long as I'm listened to, as long as the people know what I'm talking about. And there are too many politicians in the world already that have labeled them as liberal, as conservatives, and nobody understands one word of they're saying. I try to do it the other way around.
I'm going to keep asking questions, I warn you, unless people go to the mic. I just don't want to waste a minute of our precious time here. I would ask you this, and the reason I ask that question is because I find that people who traditionally have supported the equality of men and women, nonviolent solutions to problems, the separation of church and state, I think they would generally call themselves liberals. But I find that they're silent in the case of radical Islam. Is that the same case in Holland? And if so, can you give us your explanation for this?
Well, many people, unfortunately, are silent in Europe and also in the Netherlands. And I have to sadly say that also Christians, organizations, churches, political parties based on Christianity are silent. And for instance, in my country, Holland, pastors, other people that are representing the Christian church go hand in hand often with Muslim organizations to fight against, for instance, my party. They rally upon against my party. A Christian party in Holland called the Christian Union was lost 50% of their electorate in the last elections we had for the Senate, for the provincial elections a few weeks ago, because they are against a tough stand against Islam. And the electorate is driving away from them. So a lot of parties are ignorant to the problem. And this is one of the reasons that my party became so strong. I was a few years ago sitting, when I left the Liberal Party, the Conservative Liberal Party of the Netherlands, the VVD, I was sitting as a one-seated parliamentarian in Parliament. Then we got 9 seats, now we get 24 seats. And it's not only because we are doing such a good job, but it's also because they are messing up. They are ignoring the problems. They are ignoring the problems of the multicultural society. They are ignoring the problems of the Islamization of our society. And people all over Europe are fed up with it, are not fooled anymore, and want a tough policy on immigration and crime.
Thank you. Question up the front. Please state your name and a brief question.
My name is Mark Gotzert.
Yes.
Welcome, Mr. Wilders, to Canada. Recently, our Conservative government has just instituted a department as a promise of the latest campaign to institute a Department of Religious Freedoms. Is that something that you would see as benefit? I mean, I think they're trying to highlight the aspects of persecution of religious minorities in the third world, particularly in the Islamic world. Do you see that as something beneficial to Canada, and would that be something be considered in Europe as well?
Well, I know too little about it to comment on that, but I'm not very impressed by creating a new ministry. This normally it doesn't help. And you know, the problem that we face is that most of the political elite, the political correct politicians, see Islam as a religion, like Christianity, like Judaism. And my point is that it's not. I mean, you are being labeled as a xenophobe or a racist if you say that it's not to be compared, but I strongly believe it. This is the cultural relativism, the biggest disease in the free Western world today that I was talking about. Islam, and this is one of the reasons I'm standing in court in Holland today, I said that the Quran could be compared to Mein Kampf. And it was not only a comparison of the books. If you look at Christianity, and if you compare it with Judaism or Islam, you will see that they are not leaves of the same tree. You will see that Islam is an ideology, a totalitarian ideology, because it wants to rule every aspect not only of one's life, but also of a whole society. And this makes it, with 500 other reasons, not comparable with Christianity or with Judaism. So it makes it more comparable with other totalitarian ideologies like communism or fascism, where if you were not a communist, you were wrong. Like if you were in Nazi Germany, you were not a National Socialist or fascist, you were wrong. While in Islam, if you are not a Muslim, if you are a kuffar, you are wrong, and you will be expelled or killed, or the worst things will happen to you. So we should not make Islam a part of the freedom of religion, which is very difficult. We have in Holland, as part of our constitution, the freedom of education. You probably have it in your constitution as well. And what I find most disturbing things is that we have in Holland Islamic schools. The worst thing that a society can have, that you can have young children, young girls and young boys who you want later to integrate, to assimilate in your society, to be educated in a system of apartheid, where their heads are being filled with all the crazy things and the hatred of the Quran. This is something we should stop. So I advocate a stop, a total stop immediately, and a closure of all Islamic schools in Holland. And the argument that is used against me is that I discriminate, because they have a right under the freedom of education. And I tell them that I always learned that you only have to treat equal things that are equal. And Islam is not equal to Christianity and Judaism. And I have not a problem with Christian schools. And I have not a problem with schools that are based on Judaism. But I have a problem with Islamic schools. So the only solution we have is to make sure that people start to believe and to get a discussion going that Islam is not so much a religion, but an ideology. Sure, it has a temple. It has a holy book. It has a God. So it has religious aspects. But that's about 5%. 95% of Islam is an evil, totalitarian ideology, and we should start treating it as such.
Next question, please state your name.
I'm Zane Handysides from Windsor. I'm really concerned about the major news media here in North America. A simple example, in Ontario, we have a Muslim terrorist training camp. It's been in business for the last 4 years. Go on the internet, you can find it. There's 35 of them throughout the United States. Some of them financed by a sheikh from Pakistan named Jilani. This information is not being made public. People that care about our society aren't getting a chance to get mad because the media is not telling us what's going on. And I'm sick of it. Excuse me.
Can you put your question to Mr. Wilders?
Yes. What is this is the news media muzzling the problem in Europe as bad or worse than it is here? Can you answer that?
Well, it's probably worse in Holland, but I don't know how it is here. No, the media, to be honest, the media indeed is an enormous problem. In Holland we have, as you probably have, public state-subsidized TV, and 99% of it is leftish and liberal, and they will not make any reports about the things you mentioned. We have commercial TV and commercial media, but they are only interested in quizzes and soaps and other things. So the only thing you can do is to get political support. Because when I was not a member of parliament, and I tried to make public and expose many of those things, it was very difficult to do. But if you have a political force, and you can speak about it in parliament, and you can give interviews about it, there is no alternative for the media to do that. And so, the things that I believe is the most important thing to do is to find and to elect politicians with guts. They are there. They must be there. Give them no excuses. And they have a lot of support. My party, like I said, in Holland has between 15 and 20% of the vote. There was a survey in Germany not so long ago, that proved that if a party like my Party for Freedom, something like that, would emerge in Germany, they would get 20% of the vote. In the United Kingdom, a similar survey showed that if there would be a democratic party, not like the British National Party, which really is a racist party, would start, they would get 20% of the vote. Believe me, people like yourself are in increasingly numbers fed up with what is happening and the fact that it's not exposed and it's being put under the carpet. So find, please, this is a very important advice, find your politicians and make them expose as they can, as nobody else can.
Mr. Wilders, how many more questions would you like to take? How are you doing?
How many more are there?
I see 3 people in line.
Okay, 3 then.
Okay, over there.
Just went to 4.
You know, I do want to be respectful of Mr. Wilders' time, and I know he's traveling, he's got a schedule, so we're going to limit it to, and we do have to have some closing remarks from our releaseman. So let's see how we do. Over there. Please state your name.
Good evening. My name is Scott Mayer, and my question for Mr. Wilders is that you've compared Islam with Nazism, and there are similarities. For example, anti-Semitism, racism. But what other similarities do Nazism and Islam have?
Well, you mentioned a very important one. There was a study by Bill Warner, an American professor, and it, for instance, showed that if you look at anti-Semitism, the Quran, and more especially the Medina part of the Quran, contains far more anti-Semitism than Mein Kampf. But so this is a very important thing. But the fact, the point that I want to make with the comparison between those 2 books is that they both represent a totalitarian ideology. And what is a totalitarian ideology? It's an ideology that if you don't adhere to that ideology, you are in big trouble. This was with communism, this was with fascism, and it is what Sam Solomon spoke so truthfully about just now. If you are kuffar, you have no rights. You either are subjected to Islam or you are killed. And this is what I could have as easily have been compared a book of communism with the Quran or with Mein Kampf. All totalitarian ideologies share the concept that if you don't belong to them, it's over with you. And this is the comparison I try to make.
Please go to the microphone and state your name.
Excuse me. My name is Mark Mercer.
Can we get the mic down there, please?
Hello?
Go ahead.
Yeah, my name is Mark Mercer. I really don't like to hear talk of restrictions on immigration, restrictions on dress, restrictions on well, restrictions generally.
You don't like restrictions?
I don't like restrictions. It strikes me as anti-liberal, and I'm wondering why you think a renewed emphasis on assimilation and liberal values like freedom of expression, a concern for individual autonomy, why that's not enough. I don't know about the Dutch case. I can't speak to that. But I would think that in Canada, we wouldn't need to impose restrictions on mosque buildings. No? Am I wrong? Why not?
Let's please allow the question to be put. Go ahead.
Well, why not simply a renewed emphasis on assimilation and liberal values like freedom of expression? Why wouldn't that be sufficient?
Well, you use your freedom of speech, so I respect every question you ask me. But you have to be, I have to be honest about it. What you're saying is totally wrong. If you, as a matter of fact, would not restrict the immigration, in Canada will happen what is happening in Europe today. The Islamization process will continue even more. There are many surveys that show that the more Islam you get in a society, the less freedom you will get. So if we really want to fight for our freedom, if we really want to stand for our identity, for our values, and the values that are based on Christianity, on Judaism, are really, when you look at how you treat women, how you treat apostates, the separation of church and state, are totally different, like water and fire, between our culture and the Islamic culture. So if you would be, I don't know if you are, if you would be a cultural relativist, and you would say it doesn't really matter in which country I live, it doesn't really matter if my children are, will grow up with perhaps a burqa on or not, if they will be enslaved by their men, if there will be polygamy, if there will be genital mutilation, if there will be honor killings, if apostates should be killed. If you really don't care about that, your way is the way. But I do care about that. I don't want that. I want that we stay a free country. I am proud of the identity that we have, and I will fight everybody who wants to change it. So I fight Islam, and it's the only way to do it.
I want to ask one last question myself, and then I'm going to call Roy Leishman to come up and say his final remarks. So Roy, if you can get ready.
I thought there were three of us.
We're almost out of time, and I want to be respectful of the time. But if I don't know if Mr. Vilder's going to stick around. It's almost 9 o'clock, and we did promise to wrap things up. And it's just a very brief question. I have heard in the past you've called for the Quran itself to be banned, and this is on. Do you believe in? Do you still believe that? And how do you reconcile that with your comments about freedom of speech?
Yes, that's a very good question. Indeed, I asked, I think it was 3 or 4 years ago in the Dutch Parliament, I put forward a resolution, a motion as we call it, to ban the Quran. And you have to see that, because I'm not in the habit of banning books. It would be on the contrary of, indeed, of freedom of speech, in the Dutch context. Because in the Netherlands, a few decades ago, Mein Kampf was outlawed. And Mein Kampf was outlawed for certain articles of our penal code. And at that time, when the Dutch Supreme Court said that Mein Kampf should only be allowed for in universities for studies and things like that, but not being sold in bookshops anymore, the left and the liberals in Holland applauded that decision. They said, it's such a good thing that this terrible book cannot be sold anymore, because it's a terrible book. So now I thought, well, look, if they have any double standards. So I went forward in Parliament and I said, here I have another book. It's even worse than the book that you applauded so much a few decades ago, and you never asked since then to overrule the ban of selling it. So if you don't have any double standards, now you must support me in my resolution to also ban the Quran. But of course, it was total silent in Parliament. Nobody spoke, they only said that I was a crazy guy wanting to ban the Quran. So what I really tried to do, and of course this motion was rejected, and we went on with normal other politic things. But what I tried to do with this proposal was to expose the left that with the same articles that Mein Kampf was banned, they should also support a banning of the Quran, and by not doing so, they proved who they really were.
Ezra, do you think I could ask a short question?
You know what? I want to get things done as quickly as possible, and there would be 2 other people in line before you, so I'm going to say no with apologies. I'm going to invite Roy Leishman, a columnist and commentator from London, to give our closing appreciation to our speaker.